everyone. Happy Tuesday. My name's Sarah. I'll be your host today. I am super excited to bring Julianne Finkelnburg onto the call to talk about how to avoid common stormwater permit violations. Obviously, this is pretty technical, in depth, so super excited to have an expert at TRD, no less. So, very excited. Just before we kick off, there will be some questions at the end. So, I really encourage you all to type any questions in the box in the question panel at the bottom of the GoToWebinar screen. If you have them as they arise, I'll try to address them throughout, but there will be time at the end to answer any specifics so we can get to that. And as I mentioned, my name is Sarah. Let's see if I can change the slide. There I am. I'm a communication specialist at Mapistry. I'm really enjoying leading these coffee and compliance webinars. They've been going on for a while, and each week we try to bring in new speakers within the industry to tell their story of how they greet challenges and how they implement best management practices to stay in compliance. So my job's super fun. I just get to ask questions and learn a lot about industry and best practices. Super excited to be here with you all today. Just a bit about Mapistry for those of you who are on the call that might be new to it. We're an environmental and safety compliance platform on the software side for facilities. So we'll get deeper into that today, but our main focus is on providing transparency, promoting collaboration, really driving efficiency, and creating accountability for compliance obligations. We're a data-driven platform, which means we help companies monitor, analyze, and track all of their environmental compliance needs in one system. Whether it's tracking sample results or inspection, compilation, or annual reporting, Mapistry is able to provide one platform for all of that. Which is really important if you have a lot of different facilities across the US or you're working on a lot of different things. Mapistry is a great solution for that. All right, so today we have the opportunity to speak with Julianne. She's with Toyota Racing Development to share her experience within the car industry. So I'm really excited to bring Julianne on to share how she stays in compliance and keeps the TRD facility in check. Julianne, would you mind giving yourself a brief introduction?
Sure. Hi, my name's Julianne Finkelnburg, and I started in the environmental field probably about 15 years ago in a small company and did some designated operator inspections at gas stations. I moved into their hazardous waste transportation department. Worked there for another 6 years or so, and then moved on to Kinder Morgan. They're an energy company and managed some facilities. Had about 10 of them in Oregon, Washington, Nevada, and Northern California. Managed hazardous waste, stormwater, wastewater, SPCC, hazardous materials business plans, all that fun stuff. And then they ended up deciding to move to Texas. So this opportunity came up at Toyota Racing Development about 2.5 years ago. And I have been here since and been loving it.
Awesome. So glad you're enjoying it. I mean, you've seen everything within the industry. Your experience is really across the board. And I think that's probably a huge reason of why you're such a valuable asset at TRD. You just know so much. And super excited to talk with you about, what you were doing prior to Mapistry within the TRD facility. I know the stormwater is a huge practice and regulatory focus area for a lot of facilities in California. And I know that everyone's probably curious, so I'll just ask you to repeat yourself. We already talked about this, but what do you work on specifically at the TRD facility? What does your team build there?
Yeah, so at the facility specifically, they design and build the engines for the Toyota NASCAR teams. They also do some engine parts that they manufacture as well. And so my primary areas that I work in right now are stormwater, SPCC, and then hazardous materials inspections and the business plan.
Got it. And those engines are probably really fun to watch being built. And thank goodness they have you to take care of any problems that might occur. So it sounds like you've been with TRD for about 2.5 years. Did you have Mapistry to begin with when you came onto the team?
Yeah, so they had just started working with Mapistry when I came on. Previously, the consultant they had was not, they weren't focused on stormwater. And so TRD was looking for a consultant that, were experts in the stormwater industry, and they found Mapistry, and they came out, did site inspections, used different tools like the gamma rays to kind of determine where um, metals and other constituents were coming from, and then could use that data to develop a game plan. So I was actually kind of excited. TRD was using Mapistry because at my previous positions, I had joined, a couple calls with Mapistry and kind of learned about you guys. So it was nice to then get to work with you.
Oh, that's nice you were familiar with us prior, and that sounds really interesting. I mean, coming into a new role with the ability to collect all this data and then go do something about it. It sounds like you kind of based your best management practices off of the data that you collected. Is that right?
Yes, yeah,
Got
that
it.
was. Yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, and that's nice to have those tools in your back pockets. Now, one of the things I'm aware within the industry is that within stormwater, obviously huge in California, one of the biggest compliance problems and violations is deficient BMP implementation. Would you be able to explain your process and kind of taking the data and then implementing the practical BMPs to
Mhm.
solve for those problems?
Yeah, definitely. We've had to implement a couple of BMPs since I started. And it all starts at, your data that you have, right? And then, trying to figure out where your metals might be coming from, and what you can do to then reduce them with your BMPs. So at TRD, we've had issues with zinc and copper. We have very low NELs to meet. And I feel like zinc is, I mean, it's been my nemesis since I've started working in stormwater. I think I've had a zinc issue at almost every facility. I don't know why, but
It comes from so many places.
right. um, And so, once we were able to decide what BMPs were going to work for us, we had to make sure that, all of the managers were aware of, what kind of changes were going to occur. And then we also had to then train the staff as well on those new changes. So, for example, maybe it was like outdoor storage, they had a lot of containers that might have been stored outside. We then had to move those to like a storm resistant shelter, and just kind of reminding them, the managers and the employees, the importance of, you can't just keep going back to how you were doing things. We're changing things a little bit. And I think making sure that you have management on board when you are looking to change anything or initiate any BMPs is very important as well.
Yeah, absolutely, because they're practices. We have to practice them
Yep.
over and over again to do that. And you need human hands. I mean, it's one of those things that is just taking proper care of the facility, doing the right things. How much of that was communicated within the platform, or was that kind of separate? That came from management, those BMP practices,
Mhm.
implementations.
Yeah, so that was a little bit separate. So my counterpart and I are probably the main two people that are using the platform. So that it's been helpful for us, especially since I've been working at home, and he's primarily in the office right now. So we have one area where we can go and look at everything. We can review the maps, we can look at the SWIP, all of our inspections are in there. There aren't anything like, hey, can you email me that inspection? It's in there. So, excuse me.
So no worries. I'm
Nope.
throwing a lot of questions at you because there's so much to talk about. I mean, starting from, the beginning of the Mapistry program and then going into this successful compliance area, 2.5 years, that's a long time period. I'm super curious about how you leveraged, the SWIP builder within Mapistry,
Mhm.
and also what kind of motivated that. Was there a SWIP already on site when you came, and kind of how did you use Mapistry, or what was the purpose of using Mapistry SWIP builder?
Mhm. Yep. So I believe the previous consultant had developed a SWIP. Um,
Mhm.
However, it wasn't in any format really that was helpful for us to make changes to. So that was
Right.
something that Mapistry then took and put it into SWIP Builder. And the first few go rounds, we talked with Courtney, who is our Mapistry consultant, and
Mhm.
she would make the changes, and then she taught us how to do that, which helped save a lot of back and forth and time. Instead of having to email her and then double check to make sure everything was right, we can just go in there right away, make those minor changes. Of course, it was always something we communicated with her as well.
Mhm.
Since she's our consultant, make sure she knew we were making certain changes, and that everything was up to regulation.
Oh, that's great. I think it's really important to have that team kind of atmosphere, that feedback when you're dealing with really complex and ever-changing regulations. I assume the
Mhm.
SWIP builder is also nice because regulations change, and then you can just, you can easily go in and take compliance into your own hands
Yeah,
and update it. Super
yeah,
nice.
it's
And
been
Courtney
great.
also did really compliment you and your team on the great job you did at taking this and really implementing Mapistry. So
Oh,
she
thank
really
you.
mentioned that they just did a great job. But I think being so knowledgeable is probably really helpful. In terms of the inspections and how that process changed, has that been easier? Obviously, being remote, you visit site not that often. How do you go
Mhm.
about doing inspections?
All right. So when I do inspections, for me, it's very important that you look at your previous inspections, and review what kind of findings there may have been, especially if you have teams doing inspections, differently each month.
Mhm.
So you're aware of what was found, what you're going to look at, and then review the inspection first in its entirety before I do this before I go out. And then that way I can really focus on what I need to look for when I'm doing my inspection. Especially when you're at a facility all the time and you're walking by things, you become blind to a lot of that stuff, right? You don't notice it anymore. And so, just kind of making sure that you change your mindset and really know what you're going to be focusing on is helpful for making sure you get those inspections completed and that they are correct.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I think they're called like routine inspections, but they never seem to be routine. There always seems to be something else that pops up. Um,
Mhm.
that's nice that Mapistry can help you make that kind of proactive decision. And in terms of stormwater inspections, when you go and actually collect the sample, is that also processed and kind of stored the analysis through Mapistry?
Yes, all of that data does is available on the Mapistry tool as well, which again can be helpful because it's all right there. You don't have to go digging around like, oh, where was that email again?
Yeah, no kidding. And Mapestry is pretty. The setup is nice because you can see kind of charts and graphs and trends of certain exceedances or metals, and specifically in relation to metal sampling. How much has that helped you making proactive decisions on best management practices of, like, for instance, finding where the zinc might be coming from? Do you use those graphics to make an insight and decisions into those challenges?
Yeah, I think it was definitely useful to look at when California recently changed their permit last year.
Mhm.
and the NELs were lower. So we could really look at our historical data and then determine, okay, we have some work that needs to get done. Here are some areas where we're going to need to find new BMPs for moving forward to make sure we do end up meeting the new limits. So it was helpful in that sense.
Yeah, I imagine. And for all of those who might not need to know, numeric effluent limits are those NELs that Julianne was
Thank
just speaking of. No, that was a lingo I had to learn myself. Could you elaborate on kind of the best practices or even like structural
you.
implementations for meeting those NELs? I know it's probably different for every facility, but could you elaborate on some of your internal processes?
Yeah, definitely. So TRD is kind of unique in that it's really flat, and we don't have any catch basins. So our stormwater just flows freely throughout some concrete swales on site. So that right there limited what type of BMPs we could implement. Um, so what we decided to do first was to look, are there any areas outside where we can eliminate industrial activities? That way, if we don't have any industrial activities in those areas, then we're not subject to have to um, grab samples from that area. So we did that by making a couple of changes and building a few storm-resistant shelters. We were able to eliminate about half of our discharge locations. And then the other areas that we had were our shipping and receiving areas and our roof runoff. So for shipping and receiving areas, we made sure we eliminated all other industrial activities in those areas except shipping and receiving. And we are in the process of building storm resistant canopies over that area as well. Again, that way we can eliminate stormwater from coming in to that and coming into contact with those activities. And we can then, will eventually be able to reduce our sampling in those areas. And then for the roof runoff, we did a lot of extensive research on different media types, different treatment options that we had. And, it's different for every facility, like you said. I had a facility up in Portland that, one media type worked great. We did some studies on it. It didn't work as well with our stormwater. So again, looking through all of our other options, we chose a different media. We brought it on site, did a few kind of little studies on it, seems to work well, and then decided to implement it for that discharge location as well.
Got it. Wow. I mean, those are kind of three big projects
Yes.
that you've been working on. And I've never heard of the stormwater canopy, although that makes so much sense. You're in the process of building that, you said?
Yet the construction hasn't started yet,
Okay.
but they are still in kind of the design phase, and then it kind of keeps changing as well, depending on different needs for other departments, and do we want to expand it a little bit so they can do other things? So they're still designing it, but it is in the works.
Cool. Well, hopefully I'll get to see a picture or something. That sounds really fascinating. Thanks for sharing kind of those.
Mhm.
In terms of avoiding risk and violations around stormwater BMPs, how do you know when sufficient BMPs? How do you know when you have sufficient BMPs? I think that's kind of a challenge a lot of people face is how do I
Mhm.
know I'm doing enough?
Right. Yes. Good question. So when we implement any new BMPs at TRD, we also want to make sure that, especially if it's like a filter or something like a filter sock or like the filter media for our downspout filters, um, taking before and after samples to make sure that that filter or whatever it is actually working properly. So for like the roof downspouts, we'll take a sample before it hits the media and then after it leaves the media, and then compare those results and make sure that we're getting sufficient reduction in any constituents that we are trying to avoid in stormwater.
Okay, got it. So it's really kind of just a work in progress. You have to
Mhm.
intelligently implement BMPs and then kind of go back and sample and resample and until you
Yep,
find the sweet spot.
yep, and yeah, just making sure that they're working the way they say they should.
Yeah, absolutely. How often is it that you switch from one BMP to the next? Is that a pretty arduous process?
We haven't made many that many changes, I guess. But before we had kind of decided on our plan moving forward to tackle the NELs, we did have a lot of different filter socks with different media that we were looking at. If you looked at filter socks, right, they range from pretty inexpensive to very expensive, and sometimes you have to look, is it worth getting that expensive one? Is it going to work, double as good, doubly as good? It's not a word, I know, but as the
That's what we hope for.
as the yeah, right, as the less expensive one, and trying to find what's going to work for the constituents that you have as well. Hmm.
Yeah, it does sound like it's pretty time intensive implementing these BMPs. Do you have,
Hmm.
I guess, tips on others who are interested in, saving time while mitigating the risk for these stormwater compliance processes?
Hmm. Yeah, I think for saving time, a lot of the companies that provide filter media and other types of BMPs that you could get, like a filter sock, anything like that. They do have a lot of data on their media that is available. So always ask them if they have that, so you can look and they can show like, oh, we've had a 70% reduction in zinc. Don't just look at that, ask to actually see the data and see if their numbers are, as high as yours are, or, if their low numbers are meeting your NELs or any other types of limits that you may have in stormwater. Also, a lot of other companies as well, you can mail them a big sample. I think one of the companies we had to send a 5-gallon sample of stormwater to, and then
Wow,
they, yeah,
that's a lot of water.
yeah, and then they can go ahead and run it through their system as well. So again, that kind
Got
of
it.
saves time, and that you don't have to get the media yourself and then do the study. So you can definitely save time that way.
That's great to know. I think, especially for those in California, it's just this necessary regulation that everyone needs to abide by. So it's
Mhm.
really great to hear kind of your experience there. Uh, I think proactivity is probably like the biggest focus point for all environmental compliance and safety as well. How would guess how would you provide any tips for others that are looking to be proactive, whether it be like a software tool like Mapistry or I don't know a larger team? What would you say the biggest um, a success you've had in the industry of proactivity?
Yeah, so I think it's very important to always be, ahead of the regulations, right? You want to know what your limits are, what the limits are in the permits as well. And I think just being familiar with the regulations is helpful, because you're not wasting as much time, I guess, not spending as much time
Yeah.
going through the regulations and trying to find, you know, where it says what, or you're spending your time trying to interpret it. So having a team together that can help support you, so it can be a consultant like Mapistry. Courtney's always been very helpful, where we look at the regulations and we're kind of interpreting it one way, and we can talk with her about it, be like, hey, so this says this, you know, is this kind of the correct interpretation? And so she's been very helpful in that sense as well. And you know, if you're being proactive, right, you're less likely to get any NOVs from any regulatory, like the water board. um, and that's always helpful, right? You don't want to be on their bad side.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, no, that's really helpful, and it's crazy to me still how regulations can get so complex that you need a lot of different eyes on it, saying, "Is
Mhm.
this really what they say?" Um, but I think environmental management it's always changing because what we're doing in terms of industry and how our environment is
Yeah.
responding to that is always changing. What really drew you to environmental management? Um, I'm
Hmm.
always curious.
Good question. I think I've kind of always had a little soft spot for the environment since I was little.
Mhm.
You know, I always was pushing, you know, I think when I was really little, the recycling had just come out, so I was all like really excited about that at home. And um, I really kind of pictured my career to be more on the regulatory side of things, maybe working for the state or the county, but my career path didn't take me that way, and I'm actually pretty thankful it didn't, because I think getting to be in the different industries that I have worked in have been extremely helpful in, you know, building my knowledge and experiences, and I think I gained a lot more on that side than I would have on the regulatory side of things. So helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that the personality is a real good fit for kind of the problem solving side, versus all the regulatory and
Yeah.
policy side. Equally important. But I've always found that, getting into EHS and industrial practices, you just get to learn how the world works. And
Mhm.
I think that's pretty neat. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Um, I'm going to flip the slide here if I can, because we have a poll question. We've talked a lot about the software that Toyota is using to manage compliance, the Mapistry platform. There's a lot of different areas that you can use Mapistry. Obviously, today we focused a lot on stormwater. So I'm going to go ahead and open this poll up for anyone. If you guys could just answer that, that would be awesome. And the nice thing about seeing a demo of the platform is that you get the chance to see kind of where do these samples go? What do the maps look like? What does the inspection process look like? Obviously, Julianne and I are familiar with that, but if you guys want to answer that, that'd be great. Julianne, I guess I just have one more question for you.
Mhm.
If you have anything else to leave everyone, I know it's probably a broad crowd. You focus on a really niche industry, but I guess anyone who's really just looking to improve their compliance program, any final thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it can be a very long process. So it's important to, you know, be patient, understand that, you know, what BMPs may work for one facility may not work for yours, right? There's no one size fits all solution. I know it can be very daunting, especially if your facility has low NELs or other limits that they have to meet. So make sure you have a good support team. Very helpful, right? Like Mapistry, they've been very supportive throughout this whole process as well. Making sure that upper management at your facility are also on board, because you need to make a lot of changes if you have to initiate new BMPs as well. And just, you know, like I said, be patient. You may have to search out for the best solution, but you will eventually find one.
Oh, that's great to hear. And I resonate with that. I think in the industry you always find people who are willing to share information and lots of great educational resources out there, including
Mhm.
yourself. I mean, we learned so much today, and I really appreciate all the time you took to join us, Julianne, and share your experience in the industry.
Oh, thank you.
All right, everyone, will have a great day. There will be an exit survey at the end. If you could take that, provide feedback. We're always interested in bringing on speakers for the subjects that you want to learn about. So, really appreciate everyone's time and have a great Tuesday.